Be it clubs, bows, axes, or swords, deadly weapons have always augmented the strength of the gods in ancient mythology. Today, we will be looking at the deadly weapon of the Nordic god of thunder, a weapon that possessed the power to preserve the order of the cosmos, and of course cause a great deal of destruction in just one strike. Before we get into today's video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, of course not with a super powerful hammer, but with a click of that mouse, and be updated with new interesting videos like this one. We are talking about Mjolnir. That's the name of Thor's hammer in Nordic mythology. This weapon is used by the god of thunder, the god who guarded Asgard, protected the heavens and the earth from enemies like giants and their armies. The name Mjolnir may also mean lightning in Old Norse, or white and purity, like that of the purity of white lightning. Since Thor means thunder, when people heard the sound of thunder, they believed Thor and his hammer were at work, keeping them safe. This weapon is said to have been forged by a dwarf, and is where Thor gets his extensive power and strength. We don't see it in the movies, but Thor actually has to wear magical iron gloves in order to grip the shaft of the hammer. So how was the Mjolnir created? Was it gifted to him by a dwarf? Well, that's a yes and a no. No, because it was created by trickery. And when we say trickery, we know there's only one person who could have planned it out: Loki, the trickster. Here's how the story goes. It was a beautiful sunny day, until of course one finds out what exactly Loki has been up to. Loki, as usual, was up to his daily shenanigans, when on that particular day, he got on the wrong side of Thor. How? By faking his death and making Thor go through a heartbreaking depression. No, Loki cut off golden locks of hair, not of Thor, but of his wife, Sif. Thor became as infuriated as any husband would get if someone cut off his beautiful wife's beautiful golden locks of hair, and started shooting thunder out of his eyes like a laser gun, swearing to shatter every bone in Loki's body. Alright, I kind of overdid that, but you get how things went. However, we know how Loki is. With his persuasive words and deceiving plots, he managed to dodge the wrath of the god of thunder and promised him that he would get even lovelier golden locks for Sif from the dwarfs. Thor then let Loki go to Svartalheim, the caves where the dwarves live, to get what he promised. You make the mistake every time, Thor. Every time. You let him go. With a snap of an eye, Loki gets all the way to Svartalheim, to the home of the dwarves, deep under the ground. The dwarves were master craftsmen, and Loki did expect to get the task done, and he knew exactly from who. The sons of the dwarves, Ivaldi. But did he come this far only to get some golden locks of hair? Come on. Loki rolled up his sleeves and sprinkled his trickery all over the dwarves, and managed to not only get his hands on the locks, but to make the dwarfs produce even more treasured items. He told the sons of Ivaldi that another pair of dwarf brothers had claimed to be the best craftsmen, and would prove it in a competition. These dwarves were the ones who had made two other precious pieces of work along with the new hair for Sif. One was the Mjolnir, a ship that could fit in one's pocket and always have wind in its sail, and the other the deadliest of all spears called Gungnir. On the other hand, he tricked the other pair of dwarf brothers, Brock and Sindri, by saying they wouldn't be able to create better items than the other two, and that they had challenged them instead. Brock and Sindri, however, weren't as gullible as the two other brothers, and said they would only agree if Loki put his head on the line. Loki agreed, but in the back of his mind, he knew he had to make the sons of Ivaldi the winners. As a result, Sindri made the Gullinbursti, a boar with golden hair. It gave off light in the dark and could run through water or air, and was better than a horse. Then they made another item, the Draupnir, which was a golden ring which reproduced itself 8 times every 9th night. In the meantime, Loki was up to what he does best, and had turned into a fly and kept pesting Sindri while he worked. Next up, Brock began working on the hammer, and Loki once again became a fly, and this time bit Brock in the eye. Sindri still managed to make the hammer of unsurpassed quality that would boomerang back to its owner after being thrown. It was created with spells, so to ensure it would never miss its mark. But it had one flaw. The handle turned out shorter than he wished. Loki took all the items and gave the hammer and new hair to Thor, the ring and spear to Odin, and the ship and golden-haired boar to Freyr. Loki thought he had won the deal with Brock and Sindri because of the flaw in the Mjolnir, but the dwarves insisted he had to pay for the magnificent pieces of work they created. The gods acknowledged Loki needed to pay the dwarves for his work, the best gifts ever. And that wasn't by any golden coins, but the payment was his head. That's upsetting. No matter how much Loki might make you angry, you still end up having sympathy for him. But don't worry, Loki isn't in need for anyone's sympathy. He's smart enough to trick anyone out of any situation. He talked to the dwarves, telling them that his neck was attached to his head, and his neck was not part of the deal. At the end of all of that Loki talk, the dwarves let Loki be. They were content in only having sewn Loki's mouth shut. Loki had just escaped with his life. In the mean, Thor had his new hammer toy to play with. The Mjolnir was used as a ceremonial tool, giving blessings at birth, weddings, and funerals. Scenes of a marriage have been found on an ancient rock that depict an occasion where a marriage was blessed with Thor's hammer. For example, of many things, one thing the couples would be blessed with was fertility, as Thor is also associated with fertilization of agriculture. And of course, the Mjolnir served as a weapon of war. Ever since then, Thor's life was awesome. Until on one notable occasion, a giant managed to steal the hammer. He was, however, willing to return it, but in return for something. He would have to be married to the goddess Freya in return for the hammer. But really, if the giant was worthy enough to pick the hammer up, then Freya should have married him, right? When this news spread and it reached the Norse gods, they became furious. As they sat in council, Heimdall suggested that Thor should go to Jotunheim, the homeland of the giants. Thor should disguise himself as Freya and get his hammer back, and then take vengeance on the thieves that stole it. Thor protested, saying disguising himself as Freya is unmanly and a dishonorable thing to do, and that if he did such a thing, he would become the laughingstock among the inhabitants of Asgard for the rest of his life. That's when the cunning Loki comes forth and points out, if Thor doesn't follow Heimdall's plan, Asgard will soon fall in the hands of the enemy and will be ruled by the giants. At last, Thor finally agrees to Heimdall's plan. He dresses up as Freya and manages to fool the giant to believe he is really Freya, the goddess of love, beauty, fertility, among other things. The giants were fooled, but when the time for dinner arrived, Thor and Loki found themselves in trouble. Thor alone ate an entire ox, ate salmon, and all of that which had been prepared for the woman. This made the giant suspicious. He said never had he seen in his entire life a woman have such an appetite. Thor and Loki were put on the spot, probably more nervous than ever, about to get caught red-handed. Right then, Loki spoke up. The fair goddess has been so lovesick for you that she hasn't been able to eat for a week. Phew. The time for marriage had finally come. The giant called for the hammer so that he could bless their union. The union of Freya and the giant, which was in actuality the marriage of Thor and a giant. When the Mjolnir was laid on Thor's lap, he didn't wait a second longer and he grabbed the hammer and struck the giant groom. And not only him, even the wedding guests were not spared. Thor had successfully gotten his hammer back and destroyed the giants, and the most important task of the day, he didn't get married with a giant. All turned out great after all. But wait, he couldn't return to Asgard with beautiful locks of hair, wearing a wedding dress. In a jiff, Thor, the god of thunder, changed back to his usual clothes and returned back to Asgard victorious. Now you know one of the many adventures of Thor and his super powerful hammer, Mjolnir. If you liked our video, give it a thumbs up and visit our channel and check out more interesting stories of Norse mythology and other awesome videos because you know it's interesting.